you're watching Head to Head. I'm Katerina Busol with UATV. The UN General Assembly has passed Ukraine's resolution on the enhancement of protection of human rights in Russian-occupied Crimea. What does this resolution mean for Ukraine, Russia, and all the others? To dive into all the details, we're joined in the studio today by Katerina Busol. She's a lawyer with the Global Rights Compliance. Hello, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So what does this resolution imply, and what does it mean for Ukraine?
Well, firstly, it's very important that such an international body as the UN General Assembly has voiced a very strong support, namely 70 votes for the resolution that condemns the human rights situation in Crimea, that stresses again that Russia has to comply with the requirements of the provisional measures as indicated by the International Court of Justice this year in April, that it has to restore the full functioning of the Majlis of the Crimean Tatars, and that it has to ensure that all the rights of the ethnic Ukrainian and Crimean minorities in the peninsula are properly exercised, that they have the access to education in their own language in Ukrainian and in Crimean Tatar, and that they can exercise their cultural rights. Also, the resolution condemns the way Russia employs the residents of Crimea in its military service, mainly the decision of the Russian de facto authorities to use the Ukrainians and the Crimean Tatars for its military conscription. It's prohibited by international law.
And making them apply for the Russian citizenship isn't?
It is also a violation. The occupying power may not impose its citizenship onto the residents of the territory in question because it does not possess the title to the territory.
Exactly.
Yeah? Yes, so it is a war crime. It is prohibited by international law, and it's very good because the resolution was adopted yesterday, and 2 weeks ago the International Criminal Court that conducts a preliminary examination of the situation in Ukraine has actually voiced that it looks into the similar crimes as regards Crimea. So the court looks whether there are mass violations of such a character as this forced conscription into the army.
So you're saying that the resolution itself that has been adopted yesterday by the UN General Assembly would actually speed up the case that is currently being taken care of in the International Criminal Court of the UN?
I wouldn't say that it will speed up. It might, but it is a very strong voice of the international community that will also be looked by the court as evidence. Because as we know, and as it's indicated in the resolution, the international community condemns that Russia does not let international human rights monitoring missions on the peninsula. Yeah, so the fact that the international community represented by the UN General Assembly again stresses that there are mass violations and proper monitoring should be conducted in situ on the peninsula is a good indication for the court, for the International Criminal Court, for instance, or for the International Court of Justice, that the violations probably do take place if the occupying power is so reluctant to let the people onto the peninsula. Besides, we've got many governmental organizations, and we've got the Prosecutor's Office of Crimea that collect the evidence about the similar crimes that take place on the peninsula. So we've got this cumulative effect of the evidence gathered by the state authorities of Ukraine, of the evidence gathered by non-governmental organizations about the crimes on the peninsula. And surely we've got the evidence, the recognition of such crimes in the resolutions like the one that was adopted yesterday. Cumulatively, it's a very strong effect for international judicial authorities, for international courts, to speed up the consideration of the Ukrainian cases. As regards the International Criminal Court, for instance, it looks preliminary at the situation in Ukraine, and it should decide in a year or two, or there is no strict timeline for deciding whether it will open a full investigation into the situation in our country. And surely the resolutions like that, they do have an impact, and they will have an impact on the decision of the court whether to open a full investigation or not.
In the meantime, while we're waiting for the International Criminal Court to open an investigation or not, or to come up with a decision, what should we do? What should people living in Crimea whose rights are violated constantly do? What should ordinary Ukrainians do to make the situation better?
Well, if we speak about collecting the evidence, it's
that also.
Yeah, that's crucially important. It's important that both the Ukrainian state authorities consult the international lawyers how to better document the crimes, how to better structure the evidence and the arguments for international judicial institutions. Also, if it's possible to conduct the prosecutions and court proceedings on the territory of Ukraine, it's something that Ukraine should do. I mean, we cannot delegate all the court proceedings to international courts. So documenting the crimes and ensuring that there is the cooperation between prosecutors' offices and non-international organizations in documenting the crimes is very important. And actually, I think a week ago, the Crimean Prosecutor Office and the Prosecutor General's Office, they made a huge media event declaring that they submitted a huge communication to the International Criminal Court in cooperation with one of the leading human rights NGOs, the Helsinki Human Rights Union. So there should be this cooperation between the state and non-state actors in documenting the crimes. There should be surely the contact with the people in Crimea who are very brave to submit the information about the crimes, because, you know, being there and speaking about the crimes committed against them, is a very tricky.
What about the criminal cases that are being viewed in Crimea by de facto authorities against Crimean Tatars? If I'm not mistaken, a couple of days ago, there has been a record-breaking number of 80 cases being viewed at one day. Yeah. Could the decisions of those courts or of those lawmakers be recognized as illegitimate? Eventually, I mean, not this second.
In this preliminary examination report, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court spoke about the alleged crimes in Crimea, and the breach of the fair trial rights was on the list. So surely the occupying power may not alter the judicial system and may not alter the fair trial rights of the resident of the occupied territory. So if the evidence is collected properly, and if the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court agrees that it is an evidence of mass violations of fair trial rights, surely she will pronounce on that. So I mean, definitely, it is a war crime to deny any fair trial rights, to conduct these cumulative judgments, to render cumulative judgments. So the way we structure the evidence, the way we formalize the arguments, the better we do that, the better effect it will have on the International Criminal Court.
It is a well-known fact that the resolution, even if it is a resolution of the General Assembly of the United Nations, does not carry any judicial power. So what kind of effect will, in fact, this resolution have on Russia? I mean, what will happen if Russia does not fulfill the statements pointed out in the resolution?
Well, there have been instances when the issues of the UN Security Council resolutions were not followed, and we know that they're obligatory. Nothing can, make Russia change its behavior the way we want it, in the first place. But I think first, for Ukraine, this is another argument to continue the sanctions, to show that the international community, that the most advanced and developed states supported the resolution, is a good argument for continuing the sanctions, first. Second, it's a good argument for the Russian civil society, to be honest, to say that, look, again, the developed world, the most advanced countries support Ukraine. Condemns the situation in Crimea. And, it's only like Russian allies from Latin America and from I think it's also Iran, Syria. So Russia is not in a very good company voting against this resolution. There were only, I think, 26 votes against.
Yes,
so
26.
Yeah, and again, when the international courts look at the evidence and look at the attitude of the international community, surely the voice and the opinion of such an international body as the General Assembly does have its force, because there is a sort of an almost international consensus of the civilized world about the situation, the grave situation with human rights in Crimea. So it's very reassuring.
It has also been stated in the report of the UN that the next step after adopting this resolution should be deoccupation of the peninsula. Is that possible? And if it is possible, when should it happen, and what should be done to accomplish this goal?
Well, I think we should distinguish the legal points from the political points. From the legal point of view, under international law, under the Geneva Conventions that regulate the conduct of warfare, occupation is always temporary. Occupation does not change the title to the territory. Yeah? It does not transfer the territory from one state to another. So however long it lasts, like the occupation of the Palestine territories or the occupation of the northern Cyprus.
It could take years,
absolutely,
hundreds of years.
But it will not validate the occupation. So I think the point in the resolution was that indeed it reaffirms that under international law it would always be temporary. But how long it lasts, I think it's also the political question, how it will be finished, when it will be finished. So I would distinguish these things, and I doubt that international law can say when the deoccupation will take place, unfortunately.
So basically it's up to the top officials of the countries, you mean, I'm meaning the top officials of Russia and Ukraine?
It's up to
presidents and so on and so forth?
It's up to the top officials, it's up to the realpolitik, yeah, to the political relations. It's up to also to the effect of the judgments of international courts, and we will see what effect that will have. It's also up to the changes in the civil society and political circus of Russia that probably will happen. So I doubt that law can give a definite answer about the deoccupation at the moment, unfortunately. International law can only provide Ukraine with guidance of what Ukraine can do and should do under international law to ensure to the maximum effect possible the rights of its residents in Crimea and in Donbass. But it cannot put the deadlines, yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, well, you made it very clear. Thank you so much for coming and for clearing that all out.
Thank you.
That was Katerina Busol. She's a lawyer with the Global Rights Compliance. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.